Hey guys, Gary Fong here, and check this out. I got this, okay, this box is about, 30 years old, and I got this from Dee Akright, a student of mine in Florida, who happened to have this, and I don't know why it came up. But anyway, I'm really excited to show you this because this is a time capsule from I don't know what year, okay, it was about 30 years ago, but anyway, you're about to see the history of kind of wedding photography, because this was made in the days of film and back when wedding photography was a completely different beast. Wedding photography before digital was literally film. But anyway, the reason why that is such an interesting thing is because when we were shooting film, we couldn't see the images for about 10 days. And back then, there were not a lot of people who would bring a camera to a wedding because every wedding photo that you took was about $1 each. Okay, so it made it very, very critical for the wedding photographer to be able to deliver those images, and so the marketing was entirely different. But it shows you where things are going to go in digital today as we roll further. So I wanted to just show you the marketing solution and the storybook concept. So what's inside is I have 2 video cassettes. One that talks about photographic style back in the days of wedding photojournalism, and then the other one talks about design and sales. And there's a whole big science to meeting clients. Did you know that when I met with clients and had a clear table, my conversion rate, or the rate at which people would sign up, would go down dramatically, simply because when you have a clear table, I find that people suck their tummies in. And especially when you're interviewing a photographer, no matter how photogenic it's almost worse when the client is very photogenic because they're more kind of insecure about a hair being out of place or whatever. But what I've noticed is that when I was in the wedding photography business, when I had brides, they would always feel very self-conscious in front of me, knowing that I would be photographing celebrities or models or whatever. And I actually had a couple of them say, "Oh my gosh, I'm just terrified that you're going to think of, me being the ugliest bride you've ever photographed or whatever." So not the wood, but whatever table, if it's, marble or whatever, it protects the client from showing their belly, and so therefore they can relax and open up the diaphragm. I know this sounds interesting, but I've got metrics to prove it, because I used to be really freaky that way about my conversion ratio. I'm like, my God, what's happening? No one's booking. Oh, it must be the table. And what I realized was that when people would sit there and interview at the table, they'd be very, very tense, and that's because they didn't want me to see their guts. Or if the client wore a skirt or something like that, they'd have to make sure everything was just all kind of prim and proper. Whereas, like, mom's over, they're looking at albums, and then everyone can kind of slouch, and it makes a huge difference in how you are receiving information, how open you are to receiving. It goes back to yoga, right? It's like yoga. We talk about deep diaphragm breathing, diaphragmatic breathing. So anyway, there's a whole science behind it, and I want to talk about how that kind of came across, and this time capsule into the past really enables me to do that. So, first thing that I did that was really different than anybody else, well, actually, it's described in Wikipedia. So, in Wikipedia, move this over. So if you look at my Wikipedia entry, it talks about my wedding photography career, and down here is how it describes how I discovered the storybook concept. While watching an on-location filming of Charlie's Angels, Fong saw for the first time an on-set storyboard and reasoned that wedding photography albums should use a similar format to depict a wedding story. So, using sequential photo layouts rather than static posed images, Fong introduced the storybook concept. The style of wedding albums remains popular to this day. And a storyboard is something that's used on Hollywood sets. And at the Charlie's Angel filming, they had on an easel, and it was a watercolor artist depiction of, you know, what happens. Farrah Fawcett jumps into the car, she looks over her left shoulder, she drives away, and then, you know, all that. And everyone kept going up to the storyboard and referring to it, like, you know. And so I asked somebody on the set, like, what is that, and why is everybody going up and staring at it? And he told me that it's exactly what they're filming from the main camera's point of view. And the reason that was important is because it shows the angle of the lighting, it shows the costuming, it shows that Farrah jumps over, or the stunt woman jumps over a barricade, jumps into the car, and Farrah looks over her left shoulder before she pulls out. So the storyboard was a very, very easy to describe what's happening during that scene. And I thought, you know, for wedding photography, wouldn't that be cool to go backwards, to actually take all of those images and then put them on the storyboard, because obviously everybody on the set really likes looking at it. And that was my idea. And it wound up being a tremendous boom to wedding photography. And it also helped that I was very much into capturing kind of unposed moments rather than the posed moments, because when you do the unposed moments, then it can look like, you know, okay, the bride's looking over her left shoulder back at the groom who's, you know, watching her greet her friends or so, whatever that is. And I did a lot of elements like that. Like I would have the groom looking up the aisle as the bride and the father were walking toward them, and I make an action and reaction sequence. I'd literally put them side by side. And the way that I would depict that to the couples is that I would just draw it out on a piece of paper first in a little book, and then later, as time went on, I went on to design a software called Montage that optimized it. So in doing so, I kind of created my own little tiny industry, right? Because I created this story book concept, which led me to having quite an amazing wedding photography business. I mean, in our best year, we did something like $750,000 US shooting, I think it was 42 weddings. It was about $20,000, I think $22,000 each, because what would happen is I would design albums that were one book was the portraits, so that would be friends and family. Then the other book would be the event, so it would be two separate books. I didn't think in a movie you would like have, you know, it's like, okay, so now the gunman walks into the scene and he's about to blow off the head of the security guard, but let's stop for a portrait with the gunman and the security guard, you know. And that's the way that wedding albums look to me. So as a true storybook or storyteller, which is really interesting because I'm in Hollywood now, and I've actually done storyboards for film sets. But in doing that, I was able to say, oh, well, let's just have this left-right sequence, this action-reaction, and able to create these albums. And eventually it became 3 album sets. So it would be preparation or prelude, and the prelude book would be just the bride in her dressing room, and it would be, you know, the groom arriving and things like that, and that would make an entire book of its own. Then it would be the event, and then it would be the friends and family, which would be the posed kind of portraits. Then it went into 4 books. Like literally, we were having these libraries of wedding albums go out, and the 4th book would be the celebration. So it would be the commitment, which would be the, you know, the wedding ceremony, then the celebration, but before that, the prelude to the album, and before that, as a companion to that would be the friends and family. So it was quite an interesting thing. So I created that, and then I created the software in order to automate that presentation process. And then I went out on tour to teach people how to revolutionize their businesses. And so this one came with, do you remember these? Audio cassettes, which would talk about the narration of the actual book. Now, this kit was like $500, and it was amazing because I did a number of national tours, every large city, and I think it was $79 to get in. We'd have like 200 to 500 people, and then on top of that, these boxes were $500 each, and so it would be like lines of people lined up to buy them because I would introduce the concept, and it was truly valuable. As a wedding photographer, you could do tremendous business by following my methods, and so it was quite interesting because it was easy to become a millionaire doing that. I'd say sometimes in some of the shows I would walk away with like $60,000, and this is back when I was in my probably mid-30s. So it was quite an interesting time. But I want to show you what was in this book. So we had the videotapes. All right, which would show you that. And by the way, I cannot wait to take these over to Media Button here in Kelowna and have them convert that into a thumb drive, because it's. If you look at this photo of me back then, okay, so I don't know. Let's see if you can see that. I think you can see it, right? So there's me. Oh, geez. And I was beard, nothing like a Chinese man with a beard, right? So I was in my mid-30s, and anyway, and this is the way that I used to dress. I used to wear tank tops because I'm just metabolically very hot, and then I would wear a blazer over that. So you've got tank top, blazer. Then it would be denims, and then it would be runners, white runners, typically, like Adidas runners. So, you know, it was quite an interesting look back then. But anyway, so a couple of things that were revolutionary about what I was doing. One was I was one of the first photographers that went into 35 millimeter, and you'll see. So what I used to do is, rather than send out brochures, I would send out these really cool cards. They were like Z cards for models. Back in the day, before there was internet and sharing of images over the internet, models had to use what was called Z cards, and this was the Z card format. So rather than be the model, I would actually be the wedding photographer using Z cards. Now, this card here particularly is very interesting. It tells quite a story because it is a 35 millimeter. And I was one of the first photographers that switched from Hasselblad medium format, 2 1/4 inch square, Instagram format now, to 35 millimeter. 35 millimeter gave you the blazing fast 5 frames per second. Now we're doing 20 frames per second on the Sony A9, but 5 frames per second on the, it was the Canon EOS 1D. I actually used the Canon EOS A2E back then because I really liked the eye autofocused function. That was really kind of cool. But in doing so, I was able to shoot a couple thousand frames per event, and it was a lot of editing, right? Because you had all of these frames, and then you had to pre-design them into a proposed storyboard layout. Then the couple would go through and simply take out the ones that they didn't like. You know, what's really interesting about all of this is that I've lived so many lifetimes since then. If you look at my Wikipedia, then from then I would go on to start Pictage, the lab at Pictage, and then which wound up being the largest digital photo lab, professional photo lab, online digital professional photo lab in the country. Within a couple of years, we went from, I think when I joined, it was like 5 employees, and we went up to 170 by the time we sold, and we sold it for $35 million. Then I would go on past that and then create the Lightsphere, which then would go on to sell like $100 million worth of that invention. So it was honestly, and I will talk about like the intuition that led me to all of these weird things, right? Because what's the reason that I would think, oh, you know, that's weird that it's at Charlie's Angels, they're doing storyboards, and how can I do that to turn, I mean, I was a $150 wedding photographer, and I turned that into quite, you know, the little business. But I cannot thank Dee enough for sending this to me, because I can't wait to share it with my children. And also, what's cool is that, you know, these videos that I'm doing, they're really kind of for my kids. I was at the bookstore the other day. So they went to the drugstore and they have my Lightsphere. And so they got quite a kick out of that at London Drugs. And he said, "Oh my God, that's Daddy's product." And then we went to the bookstore here in Kelowna, and I said, "Oh, let's see if Daddy's book is here." And then I went on there and typed in a search for my book that was in the bookstores in 2009. And of course, it wasn't in stock, but I showed the kids, and my daughter looked at me with this one glary eye and said, "Dad, you have a book?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "And you write movies?" And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "What kind of man are you?" So that prompted me to make videos. Of course, it's all fun for you to share, because if you can get some inspiration out of my many growth opportunities over the years, then that's great. But, you know, I'm constantly writing down in my journal notes to share with my children, for things to be, you know, distinctive when they grow up and are able to receive it. Those little nuggets of knowledge. But anyway, so yeah, $500 for this, and it was really worth it. And I don't know how many of these we sold, but it was crazy. It was mayhem. It was like Beatles at Shea Stadium. And so, you know, kind of fun. I consider myself extremely fortunate for this chapter in my life, among many chapters. The chapter when I was a wedding photographer and had so much success, but was able to use that success and help other people enjoy that success, and then in the process, change an industry. So I will not minimize my role in that. Even today, people come up out in public and they say, "Oh my God, that's Gary Fong. We love your work." Like, as a what? Like, "Oh, as a photographer." And I'm like, okay. And they'd want a selfie. But, you know, I haven't been a professional photographer for 18 years at this point. But the fact that I am known as a professional photographer is quite flattering, because, hey, look, you know, Leonard Nimoy will always be Captain Spock. Or, you know, Greg Brady, whatever his real name is, will always be Greg Brady. Well, that's not anything to be ashamed of. That's freaking cool that you had that chapter in your life. So if that was my only chapter as a wedding photographer, and a very influential one, I'll take it. So anyway, thank you for the memories, and love sharing it with you. Thanks for watching.